Good evening. This is the Town of Austining Planning Board for June 20th, 2018. Let's just go around the board, the room and introduce ourselves.
Mark Hopefully, Planning Board member.
Greg McWilliams, Chairman, Vice Chairman.
Ching-Hua Chin, Chair.
Gareth Upham, Planning Board member.
Jim Vacinas, board member.
Nancy Arcia, Consulting Engineer to the Planning Board.
Sandy Anelli, Secretary.
David Stolman, Planning Consultant to the town.
Kathy Zolantis, Planning Board Attorney.
Okay. I understand that we might have some issues that we could get some legal advice on. Could I have a motion to go into executive session first?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mark. Second? Okay, great. No objections? Okay, could I have a motion to go back into public session?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Great, no objections? Right, back into public session. Our first item on the agenda is the Village of Austining has a water treatment plant at 25 Reservoir Road with a site plan review before us. Is the village here?
Yes.
Great. Is there anything you wish to present to us?
Yes. May I?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman, Town Board. My name is Paul Fraioli. I am the Public Works Director and Engineer for the Village of Austining. With me this evening, we have Andrew Teese, who is our Water and Sewer Superintendent in the Village of Austining, as well as our consultant engineers for this project, which we're going to discuss tonight. Behind me are Michael Broder, he's the project director with Hazen and Sawyer Engineers in New York City. Julie Hersner, who is the project manager, and David Braun, who is the project engineer on the project. They have a PowerPoint presentation that they would like to present to you this evening, which I believe will answer a lot of the questions that came up in previous meetings that we had, and we'll go into that timeline in a minute. They also received questions as a follow-up to some of the earlier meetings we had, which they've incorporated into their presentation. And then it will be available after the presentation, as will Andy and I, to answer any technical questions about the proposed methods of treatment and the construction of the building, and the actual construction presentation and proposal as it relates to the things that would be of concern, interest, and inspection of the planning board, i.e. secret, environmental assessment, site plan, what have you. So before I turn it over to Hazen and Sawyer, I would like to give a little recap on how we got to where we got today. As I believe you know, but for the benefit of those who don't, the town and the village is the purveyor of water to the village and town of Austining via the Indian Brook Water Filtration Plant located in Crotonville in the town. So that last plant's improvement, without giving an entire chronological recap of since back in the late 1800s when we started taking water from the newly constructed Indian Brook Reservoir from the Indian Brook, was last improved and expanded in the early 80s. At that point, the dual media filtration process, which provides potable water to the village and the town, was this last expansion. And since that time, if you watch any of the village board meetings or are privy to any of that information, you can see that we've done a lot of improvements to that plant with its technology that's in place now, which is dual media filtration. But after much studies and incorporating what is necessary based on the village's comprehensive plan, and after meeting with our consultants and our prior planners and our water superintendent, that plant is going to be undersized. And we are taking the necessary steps to start the design process and the eventual and hopeful construction of a plant which will serve the future communities in the village of Ossining well into the future. And that is the 7 MGD dissolved air flotation plant, which is going to be presented to you tonight, versus the 4 million gallon per day dual media filtration plant, which I just discussed. So again, a quick timeline before I turn it over to our consultants to give you their PowerPoint presentation. About a year ago, the consultants and I and Mr. Teese met with the town supervisor, your town consultant planner, and building inspector to discuss what at the time was about a 30% design submittal, which more or less relates to a concept design with the technology we were proposing, dissolved air flotation, to talk about the necessary steps that we would have to take to construct this facility since it's not in the village. That was followed up with some informal meetings and telephone conversations and emails as we went through the design process. And sometime, I'm going to estimate last March, the consultants made a request, because we were instructed at the earlier meeting to go into zoning because the building's envelope, and I'm not going to go too much into their presentation. We met with the town zoning board. The town zoning board at that point, after hearing the presentation by Hazen and Sawyer, passed a resolution sending us here in front of you. And after the request upstairs through Sandy's office to get on the agenda, we're here tonight and making your first presentation to you all. So again, we appreciate the time, and with the pleasure of the board, I'd like to turn it over to our consultants now to go through the PowerPoint prior to answering any of your questions that you have.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so as Paul said, the original Indian Brook plant was constructed a long time ago in 1930, and there was a major expansion to the plant in 1986, so over 30 years ago. The village has been doing a great job at maintaining the plant and implementing improvements over the last 10 years to keep the plant up and running, but it's at the end of its useful life, and it's also designed and it's treating basically for MGD. And to give you an example, yesterday the demand
What is MGD?
million gallons per day. So that's the amount of water that's treated at the Indian Brook water treatment plant right now. Yesterday, Andy was
3.79.
So, you know, it's beginning of the summer, it's going to get worse over the course of the summer, and demands have been peaking up over 4 MGD. So at demands that are greater than the original design capacity of the existing water treatment facility. Whoops. Okay. So the existing facility and the new facility treat water that is blended from the new Croton Reservoir that comes down the old Croton Aqueduct to the site, as well as the Indian Brook Reservoir. The treatment in the existing plant is a series of different unit processes that are, you know, used to bring the water to its final quality. There's pre-oxidation, coagulation, flocculation, settling, filtration, and then there's post-treatment chemicals that are added prior to the water going into a clear well and then out to distribution. Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant is currently meeting all of their water quality goals, but in the future, they would likely have trouble as demands increase. So, as I said, the existing facilities, 4 million gallons per day, that's how big it is, that's how much water it can treat. The maximum flow predicted in a 5-year projected peak monthly average is 4.5, and that's based on planning information we had been given several years ago when we were studying possible growth in the area and looking at the existing capacity of the existing Indian Brook water treatment plant. We also looked out on that
Of the
plan.
4 million gallons, how many people does that serve? Whether it's the village people and the town people, or Briarcliff or whatever. How many people does that 4 million gallons serve?
30,000 people.
30,000. Presently. Thank you.
So with the planning information we were given a few years ago, we looked at that 5-year projected peak monthly average. We also looked out 25 years to plan for the future when sizing the plants, and a 20-year projected peak monthly average plus some contingency for emergency conditions like line breakage in the distribution system would place the capacity of the new plant that's being constructed at around 7 million gallons per day. This is just showing the different process units that are in the existing plants. I read them before. You see the first thing you do is oxidize the water, then it goes through a couple of stages that you need prior to the filtration. So the particles in the water are flocculated by adding treatment chemicals. Then there's a settling step, so the particles are allowed to grow bigger, they're settled out, and then whatever's remaining is filtered in a filter bed, and then that water goes to a clear well. When you're looking at the design criteria for the water treatment plant in any one of these unit processes, we look in this area to meet 10 state standards, and New York State Department of Health has adopted 10 state standards as the design criteria that need to be met as a guideline for treatment. So we looked at the existing Indian Brook water treatment plant, and as the water demand is increasing, some of these unit processes won't make it anymore. So for today, with the existing average summer demand, oxidation is sized adequately, mixing is sized adequately, but flocculation, settling, and filtration are not adequately sized for the required redundancy that would be needed, and that would be a situation that gets worse. And the clear well is also has no redundancy in it, which is a current 10-state standard or on New York State Department of Health requirement.
Sorry, what is clear well?
The clear well holds the finished treated water prior to going out to distribution, and normally, and would in this case, provide contact time for disinfection.
And the chemicals, is there a list of the chemicals that you put in the water?
In this presentation,
In the booklet that you have,
yes, it would be in the environmental assessment. So the new process train.
I apologize. You're going from 4 million, which we have today, to what size?
6.8.
6.8, and 6.8 serves how many people?
Well, it'll serve 30,000 people, but it's looking out 25 years.
To serve how many people
It's in your demand.
In the demand projections, we kind of based it on
I'm just,
growth.
you don't have to give me that number today, but I would like that
Okay.
number.
We can formally respond to that. So we do actually have a chemical shown here in the process train for the future proposed water treatment plant. So you see the pretreatment chemicals are shown there in the first, the gray arrow showing right before rapid mix. There's a coagulant that's added. That's the polyaluminum chloride, a polymer as a coagulant aid. And then the carbonic acid is not something that's actually in the current design, but could be added in the future for pH adjustment. The water would go into a mixing stage that would just mix the pretreatment chemicals. Then through flocculation, which I described earlier, which is growing the particles in size so that they can be removed in the further treatment processes. Dissolved air flotation is a clarification process where you inject saturated air into the water and it floats the particles to the top of the tank, and then you skim the particles off the top of the tank. It removes about 90% of the solids in the water, and then what's remaining goes on to the gravity filters. And so the water would be filtered through dual media, sand and anthracite, and then the final water out of the filtration would go through UV disinfection and storage into a clear well prior to leaving for distribution. I mentioned earlier, clear wells are often used to provide contact time for disinfection, so chlorine here would be added for disinfection. And then some of the other chemicals that are added are for fluoride is required in some areas.
What happens if the power goes down in this plant?
There's a generator.
And how long does that generator last?
There's a belly tank on it for 24 hours, and
We have a day tank and we have 2 weeks supply. And the generator was just installed 2 years ago. So,
For the existing
It's
facility.
a 1 meg generator. So
We
it's
plan
sized,
on-
it's sized for that facility, for our existing facility.
So we're planning on using the newly installed generator for this facility. And then the last two chemicals there, sodium hydroxide and phosphoric acid. Sodium hydroxide is for pH control going out to the distribution system, and phosphoric acid is for corrosion control. So those two, in conjunction with each other, are used for corrosion control in the distribution system. This is an aerial of the site, and the red line around it just kind of showing the property line, but also the proposed area of construction. There's a tiny bit of it that's not showing the property line, so we're not constructing in this whole site, but we would be in, do you have a laser?
Yes.
Okay, so we'd be in the area kind of over where let me just walk over here. So here's the existing water treatment plant. This is a temporary structure over the sedimentation basin, and we are looking in this area to have the new water treatment plant to be located, and here's the Indian Brook Reservoir here with the dam.
So if you build a new one, does that white building, which is a like a blow-up tent, does that go bye-bye?
Yes.
Yes.
Lasers don't work on TVs though.
Okay.
That's the downside of the screens.
Okay, here's a photo of the area where the new plant will be located. A lot of the area does have this growth. There's an area that's cleared, and then there's some growth in the area. Every single tree has been flagged and identified and would be required to be removed as part of this project.
I'm sorry, say that again? The last part.
There was a tree survey done last summer, so all the trees were identified that would be impacted by the project, and they would be replaced as part of a program to replace them as per requirement for the, the average diameter of
Sure.
the trees.
Yeah, yeah.
So here we are starting to get into some of these boards that we have here for the group. And I won't have to approach the screen if I'm looking at it here, but the first site plan is showing the entrance into the site, to the water treatment plant. We would be doing some repaving on the road in that area, and in some places we are enlarging the width of the road to accommodate.
See if the cursor will show up.
So in this area here, we have to widen it in certain areas, but it's basically showing where we'd be repaving the road. This is the overall site plan showing the water treatment plant. There's a bioretention basin here, stormwater storage here. There's a chemical unloading area here, so chemical deliveries would arrive on the site on the entrance road that exists and would pull into this area. There's a secondary containment tank in the area to contain spills in case of an event where there was a spill, which is a highly unlikely scenario, but secondary containment's been provided. There's chemical cabinets outside of the building, front-loading chemicals that are stored right in this north-east area of the building.
So you're delivering chemicals 365 days a year or whatever it is. Are any of those trucks delivering those chemicals driving on residential streets?
Well, the chemicals we're delivering will be the exact chemicals that are currently delivered, but yes, some will
Obviously
be
more
for the last
capacity,
bit
but
of the
they've been-
trip, yeah, they have to go
For the
through.
4 million right now, they're using the same roads. So the existing residential roads you're using, you're gonna be going from 4 million to 6.8 million, the equivalent of 2.8 additional tons of chemicals on existing roads. What are you proposing to do to those roads?
So the chemicals.
I'm asking what you're proposing to do to the existing roads leading up to it, the main private roads where the people in the town of Austining have to pay to have their roads paved. just a question I'm asking. You don't have to answer it today.
That's okay. We can try to address it in a preliminary nature tonight. Again, we're presenting the site plan associated with that, which is necessary for our dissolved air flotation facility. If it is the board's druthers to have us do expanded off-site improvements as you see necessary as a result of constructing this project, then that is certainly acceptable to ask, and then we will put it into consideration into our design package with our construction documents. That wouldn't be considered an inappropriate ask, and we can review it internally and with the board as you see fit.
Julie, bring it up, get rid of it.
So I was trying to point out some of the major site features. One item that I haven't mentioned yet is on this area on top of the building. This would be a green roof that's been added into the design. It serves many functions, but mostly it's meeting the stormwater quality requirements for the site to meet the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's requirements, and it's one of the best management practices for doing that. The bioretention basin will also collect stormwater runoff, and so between the three components here, there will be similar, if not less, stormwater runoff from the site to the current conditions. Closer to the reservoir, there's one additional building that is being added. It's a very small building for the addition of potassium permanganate, which is an oxidant. The village has been adding potassium permanganate to the water for years, and although there are some functions of the new plant that will allow for oxidizing certain dissolved metals, getting rid of that within the water treatment plant, there's taste and odors that could be associated with Indian Brook Reservoir, where we wanted to leave this oxidant in. So we're adding it near the reservoir as the water leaves the reservoir, and on its travel to the new water treatment plant, we would have some time to be in contact with the water and then enter into the new water treatment plant. So Paul mentioned earlier that there was a presentation to the zoning board last month. This site plan was prepared and presented. It shows a couple of items that we wanted to point out to the zoning board, and one in particular is the front yard setback, where we're over the 35 feet on the front yard here, so it's a 350 square feet that's over that setback here. There's also a wetland on the area. It's in this area. It's about 0.14 acres. I have a couple slides that will give exact acreage, and then the town of Austin buffer for that wetland is shown in this area.
So when you were before the zoning board of appeals, was it just with respect to that one variance, that front yard you mentioned?
Correct.
Nice.
And you're adding how many parking spots to this facility?
8. One of those is a handicap.
And do you presently, it's a stupid question, but it has a thought. Presently use salt on the roads or in the wintertime?
The town does. The town does.
Okay.
So last June, we did a wetlands delineation to identify the extent of the wetlands on the site. We reviewed wetlands maps and looked into the United States Fish and Wildlife Service inventory maps, as well as the New York State DEC maps. And this wetland area is not actually flagged as a DEC freshwater wetland or a fish and wildlife wetland. So although it is a wetland, it's not identified by those regulatory agencies. As I mentioned earlier, the wetland size is 0.14 acres. It's hydraulically driven by what we believe to be a spring or seep located in the downslope by the pump station of the existing plant. And we're going to wind up impacting it through construction on part of the water treatment plant is sitting in it, so we'd be looking to mitigate the impacts. The permitting requirements are a nationwide permit, and then, of course, the town of Austining wetland regulations. So for the mitigation of it, we're gonna have to do a one-to-one mitigation of the, not the 0.14 acres of the wetland area, but the buffer area around, which comes out to be about an acre. As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of trees that are going to be disturbed. The area spreads out over an acre and a half. It's specifically 91 trees. Their mitigation requirements are to replant 50% of the total aggregate diameter of the trees, and we'd be working with the town of Austining, the village of Austining, on a tree restitution plan, which would include some on-site plantings, but it also could include off-site plantings. So the water treatment plant falls in R30 for zoning requirements, and that is, the R30 requirements are shown here. So specifically, I mentioned the front yard setback of 35 feet. We were a bit over that one. The rear yard setback, we fell within, and then the height requirement, where the stair tower is at 34 feet, and the height requirement at the base of the building is 35 feet.
What is that stair used for?
To access the various levels of the water treatment plant and the roof. And since there's a green roof up there, the maintenance, the people working the plant would have to get up there more frequently than typical. There's also HVAC equipment on the roof.
In the tower from the ground with that part is, how many feet above the roof is that tower above that roof?
14 feet,
With the parapet, they
about 15 feet.
I'd like that drop down to, a legal height of a door is 7'6", like that to be
6'8".
dropped to 6'8", yes. Like that drop to maybe 9 foot high ceiling, 9 foot high.
Okay, I mean,
Not, it's too high. It's too high. It's in a residential neighborhood. It just, the one first comment I'm giving, I know I'm going out of sequence. Just the tower's too high.
okay, I mean, we will definitely look at how much it could come down to still allow for a code height to get to. There's 2 levels of the roof. There's an upper roof level and a lower roof level. So
It doesn't have to be,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be an enclosed stair, it can be an exterior stair. You can talk about it later.
Okay, and so here's the rendering of the front of the building. We have that on one of the boards here. As I mentioned, this is a stair tower that's associated with the building. There's 2 levels. There's a level that's below grade, and then there's this at grade level. It's kind of at grade at the entrance road. On the other side, there's there's a steep drop off on site. So on one side, you can see both levels of the building. This is the south elevation, the south face of the building that I was just showing you in the rendering. The entrance door here is, and there's a laboratory area over in this area and a conference room that could allow for training seminars for people who work at the plants and who work at other plants in Westchester County. This is the west entrance, west elevation of the building. That's the side where we have the clear well located, and we need access to the top of the clear well, and there's access from the building onto the top of the clear well as well. And then the north elevation is basically the back of the building that I was describing before. Since the site drops off steeply, right about here is the grade that matches up with the road. And then the lower level, which is a lot of tankage in this area of the building, is exposed on the north elevation. There's also a tank back here that holds wash water from the filters that are that's recycled back to the head of the plant. And then last is the east elevation, and this is the area where the chemical delivery trucks would pull into and unload chemical. There's cabinets for different chemicals on this side of the plant, and there's a roll-up door that would allow for equipment to be brought in and out of the plant. And the small building that's located over by the Indian Brook Reservoir would be a facility that's containing potassium permanganate, and this is a rendering of what the facility would look like. Right now, the proposal is to have terracotta rain screen located on the...
Are any of those chemicals can cause any type of fire or explosion?
So the chemicals are non-flammable, every single one of them.
And your report shows that every single one of the chemicals?
They're non-flammable, but we have located sprinkler systems in the chemical area.
I would like to see in the report, in big red, that every single one of those chemicals being used is not explosive or danger if, God forbid, something happens to that building.
Okay, I mean,
There's
we provide the
residences live nearby with
SDS
children.
sheets for them, so that they can provide the information they're looking for. I just know off the top of my head that they're non-flammable, but I don't want to speak to every single characteristic of each chemical, but we can provide the SDS sheets. So the cladding for the building is this terracotta rain screen. It's being located on the whole entire upper level of the building, and then the lower level, as we're showing around the back of the building, or the north elevation, would be concrete on the lower level, which is the outside of tanks and for most of that part. And then I started talking a little bit about the green roof already. There's a lot of benefits for the green roof, other than the stormwater management. It also mitigates heat island effects and keeps the building cooler. It also reduces dust and smog levels by trapping particulates, and it reduces the rainfall volume and stores some of the rainfall before it's released on site to the storage chamber I was pointing out earlier. And most importantly, the reason why we added it was for filtering the stormwater to provide a certain level of water quality. In addition to that, it's more attractive to have the green roof on the roof of the building for neighbors who are located at somewhat of a higher elevation on the other side of the tree line. We do actually have a sample of the green roof. We might be premature at this meeting, but we have a sample with us. It shows the layer system of the green roof, and in the areas where we wouldn't have green roof, it would be a similar system, but we'd have pavers. And this is an example from a project that was recently completed, a pump station in Philadelphia that we designed, and this was the final product of what the green roof looked like. Usually, species that are appropriate for the area are selected and would need to be low maintenance species as well. And then our next steps, we believe, would be, once we're through planning board, we would meet with the zoning board, and then we will submit the project to the Westchester County Department of Health for approval. And I can take any questions at this point.
Any further questions? Do we need to take any steps here at this point?
It would be good for the planning board to declare its intent to be the lead agency tonight
Okay.
in terms of the secret process. So you might want to adopt a resolution to that effect.
Okay, is there any members of the public wish to comment at this time? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
So I have a few questions, which you mind. So first of all, I want to say that Austin's water is already really great. It meets all the standards. I read the brochure sent out annually, and the numbers are all good. One question I have, since they're all good and they're all below national and state standards. One question I have is, will this new technology improve those numbers still further? Or are you just going to target the same levels? Going to for like lead and other heavy metals, cadmium and so forth?
So the dissolved air flotation clarification process will provide some improvement over the sedimentation process in a major storm event, I would say. Where the sedimentation process wouldn't be able to handle it as well. I think the biggest thing to focus on with that is that, yes, they're definitely meeting all the regs, and we're designing to meet regs in the future. So even if there's, a slight improvement in the water, it's still, really just looking at meeting the regs. It's more about the fact that there's not redundancy, and the plant has been in place since 1930 with improvements added to it over the years and is at the end of its useful life. So I would say you'd have a greater ability to handle storm events, so there's an improvement from that perspective, but they're putting out really high water quality right now.
They are, yeah. Okay. The effluent, if any, from the treatment facility into the stream, will there be any change to that? A. B, are there currently any regular or intermittent releases? And with the new one, will there be any regular or intermittent releases?
So the stormwater to the stream will match the current conditions. That was the intent of the stormwater management plan. So there won't be an increase in that. As far as releases due to spills, if you guys want to talk, so go ahead, Marcus. Okay.
So, a couple of mentions, and if it was gonna be asked later, so be it. Thank you for saying that about our drinking water. Regarding discharge into the stream, there is none from the facility itself. That would be stormwater discharge only. The only discharges that historically came from the plant was, some years back, there used to be process discharges from backwashing, et cetera.
That's what I'm worried about, yeah.
That discharge historically was sent into the sanitary system, which ends up in the county's wastewater plant on the water there, just down near Sparta. We no longer do that. We received approval based on our system upgrades at the filter plant today to recycle that backwash water to the head of the plant again. So basically, we have just one big mass balance, and then the solids get pulled out. But I'm going to use that comment about solids as a segue into Andy's comment, because he wants to make a comment about chlorine and sludge that I think would also be a beneficial result of the new plant.
Good evening. So as far as like the sludge production, it's going to be much less. With the dissolved air flotation, you're actually making a thicker sludge than what we're producing now. The sludge that we're taking out about 7 truckloads a week that are going through the neighborhoods. A lot of that's water. So this process, we're not going to be pumping out so much water, so it's going to be less truckloads of sludge. As far as like the hazardous chemicals, what we have now is we have chlorine gas, which is something you have to be very careful about. We're switching that totally out to sodium hypochlorite, which is it's a liquid, and it doesn't have the off-gassing that you would have to evacuate any neighborhoods, along with UV, which is one of the best processes for disinfection, which is like sunlight. So that needed to be mentioned. Okay. You had talked about water quality. There's going to be less backwashing because that first process is going to be so much better with the dissolved air flotation. And as Paul had mentioned, so much of that water used to go to the sewage treatment plant. This is going to make that process even better. So it's a different animal.
Okay, what about the fluoridation process? Do you use
we still
hydrofluoric acid?
use hydrofluoric acid. which was approved by the health department on the original design, and it's in the design for this facility. That meets the standards, and that's like,
And you're comfortable working with hydrofluoric acid?
well, we're trained on it, and, you know, it's always a political issue, you know, some communities want it, some communities don't want it.
And we like fluoridation, we like good dental health, but hydrofluoric acid is very difficult to
It
work
is,
with.
it's very difficult to work with,
It's a whole
but,
different category than all the other acids.
And-
It's a hazard.
and then you had brought up lead and coppers. Since Flint, Michigan, standards have tightened up, and in fact, we've changed our lead and copper protocols
Ah.
to make it more stringent, but we are gonna be adding
Phosphoric acid.
phosphoric acid along with our lime to generate that coating to prevent any leaching of lead into our system more to protect the residents. So that's part of this new process too.
So right now you have 7 trucks of these chemicals
Yeah,
being taken off to some.
sludge,
Sludge to some site.
correct. A week, and that
And
depends
so
on the
that's an
waterfall.
increase from 3.79 to 6.8, so.
And
Might
it's
be
gonna,
So-
double that down
So
the
no,
road.
it
No, it's
doesn't
gonna be
work that
less.
way. Yeah, it's,
It's gonna be less.
it's about 10 times more concentrated than a solid, so you have
So
less to
where
deal
does the
with.
lead and copper go?
So there's no lead and copper in the raw water. Lead and copper in a distribution system comes from within the distribution system. So you need to protect against it by using something like a corrosion inhibitor.
what we're removing is aluminum that's used for the coagulation process, and we're removing the organics. So if we can control that removal and make it thicker and less water in the beginning stage, we're gonna have a lot less truck, not deliveries, but pickups.
Where's the final destination for the sludge?
It's Spectra Server Earth Care, and I believe it's brought to a burn facility in either Pennsylvania or New Jersey.
So the wetland, I didn't see the 400-page document. I haven't looked at it yet. So it may be covered in there. I'm wondering if a fish and wildlife study has been done to see what fish might be in
The
staying
fish and
there.
wildlife study, was that done for the wetlands?
Yes, so it doesn't show up on the fish and wildlife mapping because it's too
No,
small. Yeah.
I understand that.
Okay.
But still.
Yes, as
yeah.
part of the permitting process, we do fish and wildlife. So we've reached out to them. We need to complete the process. We needed the final EA before we complete the fish and wildlife process. So we now have a final EA that we are going to send to them to complete that
What is
permitting
the
process. I'm sorry, the
environmental
environmental assessment.
Okay.
So that was
so-
most of the large package that we were talking about. It's,
So the Fish and Wildlife study has been done, but you don't have the environmental assessment document, is that what you're saying? I'm not sure. I
You
understand.
not usually, you can't complete the fish and wildlife study until you prepare and have the environmental assessment finalized. So we've started it, we're mostly through it, and we need to just go through the formality of completing it by providing them the environmental assessment.
Who or what agency will do the boots on the ground fish and wildlife study in the wetland? You are going to have a fish and wildlife study done, or am I misunderstanding?
No, we are, but I don't think they're sending anyone out to the site. We were following the protocol we have on every other project, but I might have to get back to you on the question. Somebody's handling the permitting specifically on this project, and to my understanding, they're not sending someone to the site, but if you're talking about from within our firm, we have had several people out to do identification of, with the wetlands, looking for, species that we noted in the environmental assessment in the wetlands. And so we've identified that as part of our study, but I couldn't tell if you were talking about somebody from the actual regulatory agency.
I was talking about anybody. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So you had
from
your
our,
own specialists?
Yeah, from our firm, we've had people out, specialists look at
Okay, so
wildlife
I'll see
and tree
what.
species, yeah.
And what about fish? I'm interested in
In the
particularly
Indian Brook
fish in that
Reservoir?
small stream. No, downstream of the dam, between the Croton River and the
So
dam.
we did our assessment on site. The stream is on the neighbor's
Well,
property.
what about fish in the wetlands? Maybe that's the-
Idle, is that the question?
Yeah,
I
didn't
think,
hear
I
what
thought
you
I heard
said.
the stream. Yeah, there's definitely no fish in the wetlands. It's kind of a just muddy area on the site with some skunk cabbage. It's not, you know,
Okay,
it
but what
doesn't look like a
about, but
swampy
in the
area.
stream itself, which you're bordering,
right,
yeah, right, very closely, so
right.
that's why I'm just interested in what fish.
I'll
is
have
like.
to check in to see what's done off-site for that. 'Cause
Okay.
The actual, we have a bunch of college interns working up with the filtration plant this summer, and we're gonna be doing a fish study with the interns,
Oh,
of what's
okay.
in the reservoir. So, you know, I know it's not in the stream, but I just wanted you to know that, that you might be interested.
Yeah, if you could extend that into the stream, it's a short stream from the dam to the Croton River, that'd be really interesting to
Most
see.
of the streams private property.
Well, right, and that's why we couldn't get on it. It is on private property, it's on their neighbor's property, so.
Oh, the stream is on
Yes.
neighbor's property?
Yeah.
Oh, is that the Waterview Estate?
Yeah.
It would be, yes.
Okay, and then it goes under the Croton Aqueduct State Park, right?
Yes.
So, sorry for all these questions.
No, that's
Um,
good.
Let's see, would you be able to provide at some later date a view from the Croton Aqueduct, from the state park, which is gonna be fairly close to you're proposing building? Right now, it's pristine, the pristine view from the aqueduct, and from the Waterview homes, especially like a couple of
Homes will be
nearby
trickier,
ones.
the aqueduct's not an issue. We'd have to work with, unless we just went up to the road up there.
If we had access to the neighbor's property, we could do that,
Right.
unless we'd have to take pictures from the cul-de-sac.
Right, from the cul-de-sac, that could work, yeah.
Right. That might be easier to get done more quickly, just with the cul-de-sac.
Okay, that's all for now, so, thank you.
Is there an alarm system, if there's a leak of any of these chemicals, spills, where the neighbors hear it, is there a siren of some sort?
There's going to be a strobe and alarm outside of the building where the chemicals are delivered.
At present, is there one now?
There's an alarm inside the plant, but the neighbors could not hear it right now.
So if there's a spill presently, it's inside the plant,
It's
not
inside,
outside.
it's inside the plant, and the Ossining police, under our spill prevention plan, would be notified, and they would go door to door. That's more for, that's our chlorine evacuation plan, that's why we're doing away with the chlorine gas.
But there's no outside alarm system like, okay.
No.
Okay, I noticed, Sandy, you sent over an email from some residents at 12 Applegate Way.
Yes, I sent the applicants
Right,
the
so
same number.
they forwarded it over to the applicants?
Yes.
Okay. So just for the record, they expressed a concern over a visual block, which is providing the planting of evergreen trees tall enough to provide a block of the structure, possibly paint the structure dark green or some other neutral color to blend in with the environment. Another issue that they were concerned about was environmental issues, potential runoff into their property and erosion from the proposed road, possible ice melt, salt wash from the stream impact and garbage runoff. And then they also were concerned about the noise restrictions designed for a residential area, decibels, time of day, floodlights unobtrusive and designed for a residential area. These are topics that I believe our board members generally cover anyway, but we'll just put that in our record.
Right, I was wondering, the best way to respond to that, should I do a formal kind of written response to those questions because they're not here, or?
Assume that we ask the questions.
Would you like me
Whether
to
it's dealing
respond?
with outside lighting, noise, all those items.
Well, we can schedule, we're gonna have a public hearing on this, so you'll have.
I would aggregate
I mean,
the comments.
Yeah, just letting you know that these are the comments that you would be dealing with them in bulk anyway.
Right, and some of them I feel like I've talked a little bit about
Yeah.
stormwater management.
Well, When I introduced the presentation, I did say we were going to try to answer a lot of questions because we did receive the ones you just read. So just to kind of reiterate, maybe expand on what was said for this record, and then we will have more details in the public hearing facet. But with regard to the architectural details on the building that would be exposed to the residential areas and the aqueduct, if you took note on the rear elevation there, we've eliminated the band, the color band that went around the outside of the building because of just that thing. We didn't want the building to stand out. So the residential requests that came, I guess you could flip it around, yeah. The residential requests that came with regard to the colors, we thought that the colors would be something that would blend. I think the reference was green, but we really want to get something that would blend when the leaves are down, because that's when you're going to have the best opportunity to see the plant from your house. And the woods at that time were a little more gray, if you will, and a deeper earth tone versus the greenery that you see in the summer. So that would be masked the best. And we'll expand on that and the studies and the architectural input that we have into that. And with regard to the sounds, all of the plant process and mechanical systems, with the exception of some of the air handlers on the roof, will be inside. So, which is not the case now at the facility. Some of it's covered with the air structures, so that attenuates some of the sound, but not like this building will for those processes. And with regard to the lighting, same thing. We're going to have only the necessary outdoor lighting in areas where operations will be taking place. Other than that, it will just be safety, ambient lighting around emergency access and what have you, similar to what you have around your typical home, if you will.
Is there any excess square footage built into the proposed building for future expansion above and beyond what the current intent is?
No, there isn't. I mean, I mentioned one chemical system for the future, which only requires a small panel that will be mounted on a wall, so the actual facilities would have to be located outside the building, but it might never be needed. So we didn't actually grow the building bigger for it. We tried to figure out a way that it could be added outside the building in the future.
And this building envelope is housing tankage to suit comprehensive plan projections for population, I believe, of 25 years. 25 years. So we're not being short-sighted. We definitely have what we think we'll need for that time.
Great. Can you get us hard copies of all the presentation things in color? What was submitted to the town?
Yeah, I think so.
To each one of the board members and our consultants?
All right, so just so we're clear, we will deliver to the Planning and Zoning Office the hard copies of what are on the boards right now. We will also, I believe you have the PowerPoint already, but we could make hard copies of the PowerPoint and give you that as well. And I believe we gave you 2 copies of the environmental assessment that was signed and submitted by our village manager. So we have all that. The village will be glad to make copies of the same.
Could you also make one copy so that we can put it in a public library?
Sure. And we will submit everything to planning and zoning, and if there's anything additional to the conclusion of this meeting, I'm sure Sandy can just let us know.
There's one additional approval that the planning board received recently, or authority the planning board received recently. It now sits as the ARB.
Okay.
So there's a formal ARB approval to be granted.
Okay.
And just to put it into your thinking caps, the planning board is probably going to want this to look like a Tudor building.
Noted.
Can you also get a copy over to the Environmental Action? To Mitzi's group?
Yeah, I believe the referral would have to be from the town planning to your EAC.
Okay.
So we will give the necessary copies for that referral.
One more question. The view from the aqueduct, which elevation was that?
That was the west view, I believe, and
Yes.
Yes, it's here.
Here you go, right here, too. Screen.
Yes, thank you. That's
So, this is a silly question. This isn't my question, but west elevation, does that mean you're looking west, or does that mean that's
From-
the west side of the
That's the west
building?
side.
Yeah, that's the west side of the building.
Okay,
Yeah.
that fits with how I was picturing.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is about screening. So I appreciate that you're changing the color from that side. Oh, did you say you were removing the banding on that
I
side?
misspoke, the banding was just removed on the rear elevation, but
Oh, on the rear.
we could remove it from that elevation.
That,
If-
yeah,
Again, we
I
will-
suggest that, yeah, I know it's
Okay.
early in the process.
But ARB is ARB, and we
Right.
will, we want approval, so we're gonna,
Right, yeah, I think the other
Build it
side that
once
you
it
did
built.
remove it looked better, did blend a little better.
yeah.
And what about screening? Will there be a way to put evergreen screening around in any way?
We're obviously gonna explore that however we can. It gets a little difficult
Because it filled
with that
out.
elevation in particular, because the structural components of the aqueduct actually are still intact and very important at that point, because after our plant, the aqueduct is bulkheaded, but our plant, as a little fun fact, is the only municipality to be tapped into the old Croton Aqueduct. We are the only folks that draw from that. It's bulkheaded after the village's plant, and it is a hollow tube, actually accessible for those who want to view it from the access on the double arches in the village. But I'm digressing. So the New York City is very sensitive to any disturbance in the aqueduct, but we will certainly look within our areas of disturbance where we can put as mature trees as possible that won't impact any of the, in the future, won't impact any of the retaining wall structures or building structures, certainly. That's always the case.
Thanks.
One curious question, has anybody ever asked you to have a sort of like a camouflage pattern on the brick face?
No one's asked me that personally.
Because I would think that if it's a solid color, it's gonna stand out more than if you actually
Yeah.
had it motley.
We actually have discussed that internally, so it's not just, it's not that strange of a question, to see how you can possibly mix and match colors. So that's something we were already gonna explore, but really weren't ready to present it yet. But we'll try to have stuff like that ready before we come in front of your ARB.
Thanks.
Can you also, obviously, could you have Hazen do a 3D model of this building and the other ones, almost like, would you look at a Google map? Plop this building on it, I'd like to see what it looks
We
like
have
in
a 3D
3D.
model of the building
Not just the
already,
little
so-
3D little rendering here, I really want to see what it looks like on the site
So I-
with the other buildings.
So we have a 3D model of the building, but I was pointing out, and I believe it's true, we can't drop that on Google Maps, but we have a 3D model that could be shown to you in other angles of the building, if that's what you're looking for.
If you have a 3D model, you can put it onto a LiDAR-generated digital elevation. Westchester County has LiDAR for all of the counties.
Okay.
It has a resolution of a few inches. So
We will definitely explore that.
You can definitely do that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the internal capability to do that,
Try another
Westchester-
architectural firm, they all have that nowadays.
Westchester County GIS
Right.
facility is very helpful.
Right.
Give that a try.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice to be able to see that.
Okay, that relationship exists, and we will definitely explore that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, do we have a motion to make us as a lead agency, I believe?
To declare your intent to be the lead agency.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, any seconds? Seconded, any objections? Right.
Do a motion to refer this to the EAC also?
Any motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Very good, any objections? None? Okay.
And then also a motion to direct staff to do the GML referral to the county,
I'll make a motion.
I didn't hear it.
to the county planning board, the
Oh,
referral
yes.
into the GML.
Second?
Second.
Very good, no objections?
Do you want to set a public hearing? Do you want to proceed to the public hearing as the next?
What date would be available?
if they have to submit all those copies to, even to the library, correct, there's a certain amount of time after that point.
Well, our next
Do you
meeting
wanna
is
try
on
to
the
get a-
18th, July 18th. We're not having one on the 4th.
Okay,
Do you have a preference?
Well, because I believe the public hearing should be, should include the public with the most knowledge that you're looking to give them, i.e. three-dimensional models, overlays, GIS. July 18th may be a little optimistic. And I don't think if we go into August, we are going to throw off the village's intended bonding and construction plans. So maybe something in August would be more appropriate. And if we have trouble meeting that based on some of the asks, we'll maybe ask for an extension then.
Can we meet with the architectural review board before then?
We're the same board.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The planning board
Okay.
is acting as,
Okay.
with the site plan authority and ARB
Okay.
authority. So
So-
you're doing that at the same time.
Okay.
So next time we meet, we'll be doing that. Okay. Well, on that one meeting.
Right, well, that'll be a public hearing for the site plan, but we
And
have to go
and the
through,
ARB.
obviously, we have to get through the secret process
Yeah.
before any approvals, so,
Understood.
but you could present.
So the August
the
date
plans.
would be when?
August 1 and August 15th.
have a
Um,
preference?
August 15th would be the preference.
August, is it possible we do August 1st? I won't be
All
able
right.
to be there for the 15th.
Okay, August 1st. If there's a change, we'll let you know, but
So that's public hearing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
thank you.
We'll see you
Yeah.
then. Okay, the next item we have on the agenda is the River Knoll project, 40 Cove Dam Road. We're considering the draft environmental impact statement and written comments. I believe we were originally planning to close the public comment section, written comment sections for today, correct?
Yes,
Right, I understand that the EAC report has not been received yet?
we haven't received anything from the EAC yet. We're expecting to receive something, but we haven't, not yet.
Should we extend the time for public comments further? Any thoughts on that from the board?
I think we should. It's already been extended twice. And I spoke to Mitzi Elkis, and she had some issues regarding steep slopes, but they've already been incorporated in comments that have been prepared by the town. So I don't think there's going to be anything else that she's going to. There were no wetland issues. The trees have all been marked. We're avoiding them, so I don't think she's going to come up with anything else that hasn't already been outlined in either the planning board's memo or the town board's memo.
I also understand that there's a certain amount of arrears.
There's an escrow that has to be replenished, yes.
Okay, do you have a time frame in which that would be resolved?
We'll probably be doing it next week.
So why don't we wait for that matter to be resolved before we close the public hearing?
I'm just wondering why they're linked.
Well, we're waiting for the EAC report,
Yeah.
so that's one item. If there are still arrears in terms of the fees and they have not been produced, and my understanding is that this issue has been raised multiple times, then this board has no real need to go and progress further on this matter.
I don't know if there are arrears. There's a requirement to replenish the escrow for
Do
future.
you have the amount in town? Have you paid it into the town at this point when you did funds?
No, we haven't.
Okay. You anticipated no earlier than next week, correct? Okay.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with Sandy about it. I have a partnership, we spent, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars
We understand that
to
it's
the
an
town,
investment on
so.
our part. But these fees have to be provided. We have to treat you no worse than anybody else, so. So why don't we extend the time so that you could actually have the fees in place, and also gives time for Mitzi to go and actually give us a formal report so that we have everything, all the ducks in a row.
Well, the issue for us is that we can't submit to you, and it just delays our time frame, which has already been delayed 3 months.
What can't you submit to?
We can't submit, if the comment period remains open, we can't submit documents to you until we have all the comments.
And you may not have,
And I've emailed and called Mitzi a few times and spoken to her. She knows when the outside date is.
Well, if we close the time, then that would be the time when it's closed. I mean, if you're saying that you're waiting for, do you have responses for all the public comments that you've already received? That we've already
We've
received?
written everything up already.
Okay. So at the worst case scenario is that if it turns out there's no further public comments, you would just turn over the amounts that you've already produced, correct?
Okay, if we get no more comments, yes, and it just delays it.
why don't we reach out to Mitzi from this side of the table? I'll give her a call, find out, and tell her that she needs to submit something very soon if they're going to submit it all.
Okay, so why don't we just have a date certain for a time coming up very close, and we'll close the public comment period. Right, what's, next meeting we have is July 18th, right?
Yes.
Is that enough time for us to set for closing the public comments time?
I think that's plenty of time.
And we have a motion to extend the public comment section, the written public comment section time to July 18th.
I'll make that motion.
Any second? Any objections? Thanks. Next item on the agenda is Rayford DeBurn and Sons, 52-1, 52-3, Old Albany Post Road, architectural review. Applicant here?
He was here.
They were here?
He was here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are they outside?
Let me go see.
I'll look at.
Yeah, just checking. Is 593 North State Road here? Yes. Okay. So if we don't find them, you're next.
Are they out there?
Okay, so, done a quick search and we noticed that the applicant's not here. Can I have that's a motion to adjourn into a date certain on the public hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, to the 18th, can we do that? All right.
Unless he returns.
Unless we
We'll open it
return.
again, I guess. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 593 North State Road. For 593 North State Road, site plan review. Applicant was going to respond to some comments we had?
You mean from the previous
Yes.
meeting? Yeah, so as we discussed at the previous meeting, we provided a landscape plan and a lighting plan, consulting a landscape architect here to provide the required 50% aggregate diameter. In fact, we exceeded it by a small amount. We provided a lighting plan. On that lighting plan, we showed, as was requested, lights that were shielded from the neighboring properties, that did not exceed 3,000 Kelvin in their color temperature, and they were LED, and they were also indicated to be on a timer. We got comments from Mr. Stolman that requested that this information be.
They haven't seen this yet.
Oh,
Okay, so let me address that. So first of all, we have comments that are very minor. I don't do this very often, but I want to compliment this gentleman on doing a lot of work in a fairly short period of time. So we've got just very minor comments left, and relatively minor. We're still looking at the site distance, which is item 3. Item 2, the lighting plan should have several notes, very easy to do. I'm sure they can accomplish that easily. And then item 1, in the GB district, freestanding signs can't exceed 20 square feet in area on each side, and the proposed freestanding sign is 21.14 square feet in size. That's the old sign, I guess. That's
the old sign.
over.
So we can remove the exterior molding and put
Maybe
on-
not even the whole molding.
Yeah, just trim it down.
Yeah. They're very close. So with this, I'm basically finished with my review. I think that once the public hearing is closed at whatever point, I know we're still dealing with the seeker process, I think it's time to move toward a resolution.
Okay, is there any comments from the board at this time? Is there any members of the public who wish to speak on this matter?
Oh, let me just say one more thing. When I reviewed the proposed plantings relative to the trees that are proposed to come down and that 50% replacement, they're way over 50% now.
The replenishment is way
Yes.
over 50%?
Yes.
Donna Sharp, 84 Morningside Drive. I didn't see the latest planting plan. Is that available to look at?
Should have been.
Yeah, it should have been.
I didn't get the package.
You didn't get the package. Did you get the memo?
No.
Donna, if you want, you can borrow mine.
Well, first I'd like to say that I think that this is a really great business to come into our business district, so I'm very happy about that. And I'm really happy that you're doing the 50%. But I did want to see, because I listened to the last meeting, and I heard that there was a suggestion to put arborvitae or something in front of the wall. Is
You
that
might
what
want
I
to
did?
review the plan and give the planning board comments
Okay,
based upon the plan at the next meeting. If I
Okay.
could be so bold.
I
It
can
might
let
be
you
more
this.
efficient that way.
okay, so, but this is the public hearing, so, but I'll be able to.
That'd be all right.
present it. Be all right? Okay,
Yeah,
great, fabulous.
That's fine,
fabulous.
unless you want to take a quick look at this and be satisfied right away, it's up to you.
That would be great, but I don't want to hold anything up.
Yeah,
so-
if it looks like it'll take you a little bit more time, just bring up your comments for the next meeting.
Okay, so my other question is what the stone wall would look like on the,
I
'cause that's what's
believe-
going to be visible from.
Yes, I believe we have provided a,
I've got it.
yeah, there's alternatives to that we're open to, something.
I think it was this.
Yes, that's,
Ah, okay.
but
But
to.
you're planting in front of it
Yes.
anyway.
Regarding your, I think it's page 7, regarding the planting plan, all of the plants specified are taken from a list provided by the county that Mr. Woodward gave us.
Right.
Which was
that-
fabulous,
Yes,
yeah.
so there are no arborvitae's, there is, I believe it's a type of cedar, I'm not sure.
Suppose I
Red
mentioned
cedar.
arborvitae's last time, really should have their, it was me.
It's okay. All right.
But
So
there's
just for
quite a
the
bit of
planning
planting in front
board's,
of the wall.
for the planning board's information, I'm the one that brought that to the EAC, and there's a much more, better document that's actually from Pleasantville's Environmental Committee.
And you didn't give it to us yet?
I can email it to you, because this is a very small list. There are tons of native plants, so thank you so much for doing that, but there's actually, for the future, I can send you that list, and it's actually has deer resistant and all kinds of things like that.
I'd like to keep it in this room also, so that we have it for future projects.
So,
You can borrow my whole set if you need me.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to look at this and just, but I'm sure it sounds like it's gonna be fabulous, so thank you for all your work.
And I believe it is available on the website, the town's website.
Yeah, I just know. I'll bring this right back. Thank you very much.
The photograph of the stone you're proposing,
Yes.
that's could you clarify whether that's a real stone or a synthetic stone?
It's a stone veneer, so it's not, it's not real stone, it's made to look like real stone.
So you could get a different color if you wanted to, basically.
I believe so. That was something made available on the manufacturer's website. I'll have to look to see if there's something more preferable.
So you can get stone veneer that's actual real stone. They slice it very thin.
Okay, well, I'll have to look to see what options they have. I'm not sure what they specify.
If you could explore that, it is more expensive, but it looks a lot better, especially over time. These synthetic stone, I find after 10 years, they start to look very fake and very sort of, I don't know, not appealing.
Okay, yeah, that's something we could look into.
Okay. And perhaps a somewhat darker stone, more in character with the native stone walls you see in that neighborhood, actually, would be much appreciated. If you're looking for real life examples not too far away, you could go to Casa Building Materials in Elmsford, and they have some really nice examples there.
Did you say Casa?
Casa, yeah. So they have probably 100 different types of actual stone, sliced very thin, so the application is essentially the same as a synthetic stone, but it looks a lot better and it weathers a lot better.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Someone from the, one of the neighbors wrote a letter to Sandy, I don't know if that was given to the applicants.
Yeah, we received that.
Okay, I saw that today or yesterday.
I can address some of their comments. Beginning with number one, there will be a dumpster located on the property. Pickup is typically around, it's once a week, typically around between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning. It's just typical trash vehicle. It's nothing, major. It's what you normally see. The second comment was about the equipment. So there's...
What about deliveries of
yes,
materials to the
yes,
shop?
The way that the applicant intends to and has done in the past with their business is that there's no deliveries to the site in the form of trucks with forklifts. They drive to a sort of supply companies. They put the equipment they need in their vans. Those are the only vehicles that will be on the site are their their regular cars and the vans, which are just typical vans and nothing.
I think our planning code has some type of law or something about time. Nothing, if you're delivering anything, just don't do it before 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday. I think just keeping with that next door neighbor with his or her concerns.
Yeah, and I believe the applicant is aware of that and intends to only perform with those hours. The third comment, which they were asking what changes would be made to the embankment. I assume they meant the hill in the back. No changes to that.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
But at least we respond back to what she guessed.
Yeah.
Is there any screening by the dumpster?
The dumpster is enclosed in like a wooden fencing material. We included a detail for that, so it's not.
But there's no additional screening?
No, it wouldn't be visible unless you open up the gates. So it's
from her property?
Oh, I would say most likely not, just due to the amount of vegetation between her property and this property. It's pretty significant.
And you're planting additional vegetation in the back?
Yeah, there is additional vegetation being planted. Not as screened directly, I don't believe, but...
I think she's probably more concerned about in the back, let's say the top of the plan, I assume it's north, it's not actually, but just on that side facing her property, or the other two residents up there, just block it with...
You can see that there's additional landscaping being planted behind where the dumpster would be.
Right.
Well, it's not the dumpster, it's the refuse enclosures around the dumpster.
And the the final was about the proposed start and completion dates. The applicant hopes to have everything wrapped up by the beginning of August. And so the start date would be sometime in the middle of August, probably running no more than 3 months, which would be much longer than expected. So that would be the expected completion start dates, middle of August to early November.
And had you received the Westchester County comments as well?
We received that as well. And I suppose asked the board their opinion regarding the sidewalk. My immediate concern was that to put that sidewalk in, there would be a couple of things that might be in the way. There's this drainage ditch that's comes down the side, comes to a catch basin here, but also, and the culvert and the head wall that's located that crosses the stream just to the north of the property. The other item would be that pretty much the entire frontage there is wetland buffer. And I don't know what that would, the process would be to put a sidewalk in that area.
Is there, I forgot, is there a sidewalk across the street?
There is, yes.
We have a comment.
Man? I said I wasn't gonna say anything, but I am. The reason the sidewalk does not come down in front of 593, when the town put it in on both sides, next door, which is now Petagogo, is all rock. And they did not want to excavate the rock to extend the sidewalk. Hence, the sidewalk does not come down to 593. So it was a town decision not to bring it down.
So yeah, so this property here is rock and wall. And
It's really a steep elevation change right there, she's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Their second comment was about stormwater management. We included in our plan that it seems like their main problem with what we had proposed in difference from what they were sort of requesting was a maintenance issue, which we included in our the details and in the SWIP report that we submitted, the required maintenance procedures for these practices. So as far as maintenance is concerned, it's in the client's best interest to maintain these practices, and we provide the methods by which they would have to do that. That is recommended by the manufacturer. Regarding recycling provisions, most of the recycling would be the applicant felt that it would be cardboard boxes for the most part. So we feel that with the limited number of workers that would be located in the office, it's around 5 as a maximum, because a lot of the time the workers are actually out to work other sites, that the proposed refuse area could accommodate both a small recycling bin as well as a refuse bin. And it would be a similar sort of schedule as far as pickup as garbage. And then the last comment, which was bicycle parking, which we could put a place for bicycle parking somewhere on the site. That's the only problem with that. I'm not sure how much use you get, but we can do that.
Resolution.
Before we get there, with respect to seeker, we may have gone over this at the last meeting. Are there any other town or county agencies you need approval from?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So by default, the planning board is the lead agency,
The only agency.
the only agency.
It's nice to be wanted. So what is our,
You could tonight close the public hearing and resolve to have a draft resolution prepared for the next meeting.
Would I just be allowed to make a written comment?
sure.
Well, I just think that some of these things are not deer resistant, and I do believe there's a lot of deer in the area, at least unless they're all in my yard. Which sometimes it seems like that.
Can we accommodate written comments?
Sure. The next meeting is a month off.
Okay.
Donna can submit her comments. I'll make sure I incorporate them into the resolution. I'm sure they'll be appropriate.
Okay.
If by chance there's something that's not for the resolution, I'll respond some way.
Unless the applicant has
I was just gonna say,
an issue with it.
no, I was just, if we could be provided with that list of additional plantings that include the deer resistant ones, that would be
Because
useful.
frankly, if
Sure,
we
she'll
want
be
to feed
happy
the
to
deer, I
provide
don't
that.
have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So we don't have to eliminate every single plant that the deer would like. If the applicant wants to plant them, I'm comfortable with leaving it as is.
Well, the thing is if the goal is to screen that stone wall and you're putting
understand.
stuff that they're gonna eat 5 feet up, that's
I-
gonna defeat that.
I
That's
understand.
gonna defeat it very quickly. So,
Okay, so we can separate, we can expect we can close accept the written comment from Donna, and we can.
Or any other written comments.
And any written other comments.
Can I just ask a question regarding the memo which talked about the sidewalk? I read it as like, yeah, this is just like my opinion. A sidewalk is nice, but if you put one on that side, it's just gonna stop in one area. The next building over, it can't continue. So are we allowed to say it's not necessarily needed, or?
Yes, we just need to override it with a supermajority.
Okay.
Is that correct? Yes. Okay, so did you hear the comment by Mark about the sidewalk? You guys have a problem overriding it, or you have a comment on the county's comment on the sidewalk?
I'm afraid I didn't hear it.
Could
you restate
the memo said, like recommended putting a sidewalk there. When you look at the adjacent property to the left of it, you can't
That's
put
the
any,
elevation.
yeah, because
Right.
they have
So
the
I have no problem, yeah.
there's no way to put a sidewalk there.
Yeah, okay. Right.
I personally agree with what they're doing,
Right.
is putting the planting in front to block the additional parking is more beneficial to the residents and to the look of our town than to have that sidewalk.
Am I right that
And
that
there is one
a
across the-
sidewalk across the
across the
street that's
street, yes.
continuous? Okay.
Continuous.
I believe it might end, because I think where it ends is the property line or the town line.
By where Millwood starts.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think it might end there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have no
So does that
jurisdiction.
extend as far as the SPCA?
The entire, I think it's the entire frontage of the SPCA is sidewalks.
Okay, and then it ends about there?
It
Is
ends,
that right?
there's,
Before it gets out to Route 100?
yeah, I think it ends,
I'm just thinking about bicyclists out here, trying to avoid the traffic.
I think it ends pretty much right where, right here, and it continues this way. So, around here, I think is where it ends, because I think that is the town line right there.
So, I don't think this, having a sidewalk in this in front of this property would help the bicycle issue anyway, so.
Okay, so taking those comments and our thoughts into account, Dan, did you have any further comments on this matter?
Yeah, well, I reviewed this one, and the applicant addressed all my comments from my previous report, so I'm good to go.
So we'll have a resolution as we just described.
So motion to close the public hearing with the exception of leaving it open for written comments and to direct staff to prepare a draft resolution of approval for the next meeting.
Yes. And also the explanation of why we're not going to consider the sidewalk a useful addition. Motion?
Close the public hearing?
Yes.
I'll make that.
I'll second that.
Any objections? Okay, unanimous. Next item, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is learning experience, childcare facility at 530 North State Road, site plan review. Applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Adam Wankstein from Hockelman, Tortorella, and Wankstein, the attorney for the applicant, and I'm here with Matthew Jarmel, who's a principal of the project's architect and engineer. He is an architect. Last time that we were here, we received a number of your comments, and in particular relating to seeing the rendering that we had shown you in a digital format, which we've submitted. We also submitted an additional plan which shows an elevation of the building, which includes the signage and actually details as to the signage we're proposing. Tonight, we have received the comments from your engineer and planner as we came into the meeting. And it had been our intent, and is our intent, to make changes in the plans and or respond after this evening now that we have the full set of comments. We also, just as a technical matter, added a number of agencies to the EAF so that when it's circulated to the involved agency, it goes to the full list. David had pointed out some additional ones. And I guess the final change is late last week, I guess, or early this week, we received the county planning board's recommendations on the project, not all of which we agree with.
Well, do you want to address the comments from the staff first, or what do you want to do?
Well, we received the comments from the staff tonight, so I don't know how far down the road
All
we
right, how
can
about
go on
the
that.
Westchester County then? That one's a big one.
Yeah, the Westchester County, I mean, the most basic one that's a problem is changing the orientation of the building. If you recall, at this point, the long end of the building is perpendicular to the road. The county has recommended switching it, and I think it's a somewhat generic recommendation that doesn't make sense on this site. We're trying to, I guess, go with the idea of creating a streetscape, but it's a problem for two reasons. Reason number one is that there are 48-inch culverts that cut through the site, and putting the building on top of them is not a good idea. And I guess you can ask your own engineer and planner about that, but it certainly wouldn't be what we would think would be good practice in case there's a problem and you have a choice not to do that. And then number two is if you put it parallel to the street alongside, at the end of the day, it's not going to create a streetscape because the parking needs to be near the entrance, which means the parking is in front of the building. It really is not feasible to have an entrance facing the street in the primary facade here and then put parking in the back so that the children have to walk all the way around the building. So what they're asking, we don't believe makes sense, and it would not be our intent to go in that direction. The other issue, which is not as problematic, but I don't think it works, and it's also generic, is on this site, the idea of using natural means of doing stormwater management as opposed to subsurface is probably not practicable given the site's constraints and configuration at this point.
I'd like to address a few comments.
Sure.
I actually went to the site yesterday. I purposely went to the site as it was getting dark. I actually took my dog with me, not that it really means anything. And I parked in front, and where the culvert is right on where North State Road is, where it goes down where the two 4-foot diameter pipes are. I took the dog on the lead right down into it, and immediately I saw fish scatter. As soon as she put her paws right in the water, they went in both directions. Then I saw a frog, and I was like amazed. I was like, wow, this is very interesting. So, and then it just went right into the pipes. I'm like, well, where does this really go? And obviously there's a gate across the front, so you really can't see, you look. But if you walk to the right of the property, Jason, where the karate place is, and you walk along that part, I walked to the back of that, and then there's a fence behind it on this facing the property, and you look over the fence, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole stream here. I mean, a big stream, which really starts with those 4-inch diameter holes are. And then I said, okay, I took a few pictures of that, I have them on my phone, I forgot to print them out today. Then I looked to the right, and behind the karate place, where the stream stopped, all meant it just stopped right there. There are pipes also, I would assume they're probably the same 48-inch type pipes, that go behind the karate place, all the way to the next property over, and then continue on down, and it's part of the Botanico River system. Where this stream that runs underneath this property starts is in Ryder Park, Highview Farms, through Ryder Park, all the way down, where the Flames Steakhouse is across the street. On that side of North State Road, you also see a little bit of water there. Then you walk along North State Road, where Flames is in the adjacent property. You walk all the way back towards the residents' houses in the back. And I was like, oh my God, there's a stream here. So you guys call this thing a culvert. In all reality, it's a stream that is running through this property that's been covered up over 50 years of being built. To me, it's a stream that in some areas looks like it's around 3 or 4 feet wide. I'll take my pictures and which are very blurry. I showed them to a few board members earlier tonight. I have a major concern about putting any building on this property. I personally think a child care center is a great thing to have on this property. I'm just concerned about the waterway. Not a culvert, an actually waterway that's been covered up by this code or that code or not code or whatever it is over the course of, before we've been on this planning board, over the course of probably 50 years or whatever, I don't know. I also talked to someone else recently about that, and they used to have koi pond at that place, at the garden center. Who knows what happened to the koi pond, the koi when they closed that place up. But to see actual fish in that stream, culvert or whatever it is, we're putting this big, there is the garden center buildings there and all the other things, and there's tires all over the place, and lots of garbage that you can see from the place that's the Bobcat place. I'm just very, very concerned. I want a learning center there. I just don't know how you're gonna get around having a stream running through that parking lot that's been covered up by 50 years, whether or not, if that parking lot wasn't there, that building wasn't there, whether or not if it was in its natural state, which is on the other side of the street, road, where Flames is, a little bit further up, heading towards Ryder Park. You look at that today, if this building was never there, the Bobcat Place, the Garden Center, any of that, it was left in its natural state where it was before man came, you would not be permitted in our building code to even put a building there. I want you to go back and figure out how you can resolve something like this, because putting a parking lot on top of a stream is, in my eyes, a crime. I don't know whether or not it's in our building code. In my eyes, it's a crime.
Our ecologist is not here tonight, but I have a few thoughts on that. Number one, we did call the area in back of our property water course. We did not call it a culvert. It happens to drain North State Road. It was built for the town's benefit. Those pipes that go through our property bring the silt and whatever else comes off North State Road into the water course. Number two, it goes into a culvert literally a couple feet off our property. So we're not talking, yes, there's one tributary that comes down from the park, that is correct. Number two, if the board's view is that this site can't accommodate a building, we might as well say to the town, how much are you paying for the property? Because that is the answer. You can't say that. You just can't. It's not regulated in a way that would prevent this. Number three, you have to look at the site of the condition of the site right now, and we think that we can show you, and we think our ecologist can show you very easily, that it will actually improve the ecological conditions in the area. There's no control of that drainage. It is, in fact, dirt, gravel. As you noted, there's equipment all over it. We're going to have a real system where all the stormwater is treated.
There are fish and there are frogs that live in that element right there. I'll let Garrett talk a little bit further about that later.
And if there are fish and frogs, we will show what impacts, if any, we have on it. It's not, you can't say to an applicant or a landowner, if this were in its natural state, we wouldn't let you touch it. I mean, that would be true for the entire North State Road corridor, if that's what you're saying. I mean, this, go back and look at the aerial photos of this area 50 years ago. It's, you know, it's not zoned for no use. So we will certainly have our ecologist address your concerns, but I think the place you're coming from.
Kathy, I'm going to ask you a question. We're not, an applicant is not allowed to, if there's a stream running through it, an applicant cannot put a building or something within 50 feet or 100 feet of that,
I don't think
correct?
they're proposing to put the building on the stream, right? And they're proposing to put it within a buffer area, correct?
Correct, that is
And
correct.
and it's based on a water course buffer, which is 50 feet, so it is being delineated as a water course, not as a wetland, so which has a smaller buffer area. And they would have to, and it's not like you can, the regulations don't prohibit development in a buffer area. It just has to, you have to be able to mitigate potential impacts and follow what the code says. So, I mean, I agree that it's a potential to have a claim if you tell an applicant they can't do anything with their property. That could be problematic. So, you know, what rises to the level of a regulatory taking?
So then I have another question. What happens if where the water, the 2 4-inch pipes that go all the way to the stream in the back of the property, what happens?
You mean underground pipes?
The underground pipes, which go from the other part of the stream on the other side of North State Road to the back towards the residential houses. What happens if in that driveway, which he's proposing putting there, that it's open with metal grates over it so that fresh air and lights and the animals have a freedom to go through it. And it's going the entire course to open up a stream that's been blocked, not by them, but by the prior owners of that building, and whether or not it's been approved back then by the planning board or whatever state agencies going back 50 years ago, whatever it is. I think what was done 50 years ago was probably would not meet today's code. So now, here we are, 50 years later, a learning center, which we looked at the building last week, it looks like a really nice building and everything like that. We all had concerns about the parking. I happened to look at the site and I was I walked away alarmed last night. I walked away such alarm. I was like, Highview Farms, Ryder Park, that stream, that pond in there, going across. It's a stream. It's a stream with live animals in it, and then once you get to North State Road, it stops. It's hidden, and then when you go to the other side where the residential houses are, it starts again. It's been hidden for 50 years.
Right. So what is your question?
I'd like to see whether or not they can open up that park,
Daylight the stream?
Daylight the stream. Daylight the stream.
I don't believe that's a reasonable thing to ask them to do.
Why don't we continue on with more comments? Do we need to discuss the legal issues? We can go to executive session without this. Anybody else want to comment on this, ma'am?
I mean, I commented at the last meeting about the landscape buffer between a residential property and the requirement there for between a residential property and the proposed. And the last thing more I'm thinking is that might be the happy middle ground
I'm sorry, I missed
between
that
the
when
two.
it was looking, I apologize.
In your bulk regulation chart, there's
Yes.
a rear yard landscape buffer to a residence district
Correct.
of 20 feet.
Yes.
And the proposed is 2.
Where the playground is, it goes up
Yes.
to about, I think,
Right.
foot 15, yeah.
If we can achieve a compliant buffer between the residential district and the proposed work,
Jim, if you look at my memo,
yes.
maybe you
It's a
have.
6-foot tall fence.
Maybe you have already. I quoted from the zoning law as a reference for you to make this kind of judgment, have this kind of conversation. So in the middle of page 2 is a quote from the zoning law regarding this buffer. And it says, between any non-residential use and a residentially used lot or residentially zoned lot, a buffer area of at least 20 feet wide with native non-invasive landscape screening shall be provided. Such planting shall be a mix of evergreen shrubs and coniferous and deciduous tree species. Said coniferous tree shall have an initial height of at least 6 feet. Said deciduous tree shall have a minimum caliper of 4 inches as measured 12 inches above finished grade, and said trees shall have an expected ultimate height which suits their intended purpose and which shall be planted close enough to form a visual barrier. At the sole discretion of the approval authority, a 6-foot-high wall or fence suitable in appearance to the surrounding area may be substituted for or be required to supplement the landscape plantings as a visual barrier for the residential property from the non-residential use. All fences shall be installed with the more attractive side facing neighboring properties. And what's being proposed is the 6-foot-high vinyl fence along the rear property line with wetland mitigation plantings in its southeasterly corner of the site. So not making any sort of judgment, that's the provision we're talking about.
I still think adding the 20-foot buffer helps solve multiple issues.
We understand what you said. We're going to
Appreciate it.
look at the comment, and
I'm just
we
speaking
think
for myself.
maybe it's not what we're showing you. We think we can achieve the goal without maintaining the buffer, but we'll look at it and we'll
I
come back.
appreciate
We
that.
understand the comment.
I also have, on my end, I have a lot of concern about the parking lot and the use of any type of salt. Any type of salt with the native stream and fish and frogs and all these other animals there. I think if it ever gets approved, they could never use something like that. And I don't know if we as a
Are
planning
you
board
planning
can
to
do
stop,
that.
are you planning to stop this town from using salt on the road?
On
State goes
something.
right into that. Just remember the
I
limitations.
know, I'm just saying, I don't know whether or not we as a planning board ever have that, but in good conscience, when you're looking at fish and frogs, and you're looking at a stream that's coming from RV Farms, that's going into the Botanical River, that goes into you follow that stream going all the way across, that's where it goes. Am I gonna go up to the Rockefellers and to the state and say, we're putting salt into your stream? And me as a citizen of the town of Austining, and I'm sorry I'm saying it, I'm concerned about it. I think that if this goes forward.
The short answer is we don't have that authority, so.
I think we can put a provision in on our process. Kathy, you're gonna have to help us look for something like that. I'm concerned about putting salt in the Botanical River, into the Hudson River.
There's potential safety issues too for the patrons,
There are
right?
there's
so
other
that-
areas in this country where they use sand and other products that are not salt-based.
Well, maybe you could ask
And
the
I know this
applicants
is-
to look into the feasibility of those
Yeah.
those
I'm
other type
playing
substances.
devil's advocate, I apologize, I'm just trying to be nice. I am just very concerned about those fish and those frogs that I saw in that stream last night.
And I'm an attorney and our wetlands.
You're an attorney. I am
Our
talking
wetlands
about
consultant-
fish.
Our wetlands, please let me finish. Our wetlands consultant isn't here tonight. He will address your ecological concerns. I don't know, as an attorney, that you can treat this piece differently than every other piece on North State Road. And I would note that 2 things. Number one, the water's coming, a good portion of the water is coming off North State Road, and I guarantee you they're using chemicals to keep that clean. And I'm not saying that your concern isn't justified. And number 2, our papers right now show that with our SWPPP, we are going to be treating the water coming out this site so there's no increase in the peak grade of runoff, and so that we're maintaining water quality, and that's part and parcel of what we're talking about. Right now, it's running off uncontrolled, off pavement and dirt.
By the way, Dan, is North State Road is it what type of road is it? Is it a state road, county road, anything like
It
that?
used to be a county road, but now it's a county.
It's a town road.
Okay. You had a comment?
So I have some comments. I wanted to wait to hear what Mark and Jim had to say. I wish your
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I wish your ecologist was here tonight, because I think I've read the biological evaluation and assessment, and I find it lacking. In fact, I would use stronger language, and I would say that it's a misrepresentation. Not intentional, but it misrepresents the ecology and the ecological function of the entire stream and wetland system there. For instance, it was stated several times that that the stream running behind the property is an intermittent waterway. It is not. It is a continuous tributary to the Canico River. It said somewhere, though I couldn't find it right now, it either said it explicitly or implied that there were no fish in the stream. It mentioned fish. I wish I could find that directly. But as I'd like to second what Mark said, by direct observation, I too have seen fish in that stream. In fact, identified two types back when I believe you yourself was representing the artists.
I was not involved.
Oh, that wasn't you. Sorry. My apology.
No apology necessary. It was not me.
Anyway, there's another project just up the road,
Yes.
Artist Senior Living, and that also affects this stream system. I walked through it and found two types of fish, creek chub and black-nosed dace, as well as frogs. So I concur with that and take issue that these fish, which were very obvious because of very high populations of both, if your ecologist was there, I can't imagine that he could have seen them. So either he did no boots on the ground investigation, or I would suggest you find another ecologist.
I don't think that's fair. I will tell you that. He's
do.
not here right now, and
Okay.
he's not
I'm
here
not arguing.
explaining
I'm making
himself.
comments.
I know he was to the site. You know,
No.
it's one thing to disagree with it. It's another thing to
I'm not
to
saying
take a
that-
shot at his professional integrity or what he's done here.
I am taking a shot at what he has done here.
That's fine.
Okay. I'm not making a general judgment about the man or his firm.
I understand, but saying we should find another ecologist goes beyond critiquing his report.
In the plan, I did not see much of a vegetative buffer between the stream and the parking lot, if any. Am I correct that it was really, your plan was to just put up a fence and replant some of the, just put up a fence, basically? I didn't see.
No, there's actually quite a bit of landscape planting in the area over here, not where the playground is.
So what about
There's
the-
native vegetation, and again, I apologize, because I'm a layperson, and I do not want to misrepresent, but that's my understanding.
So.
This isn't the right plan.
It's the intention of a buffer to to have width and a surface such that any pollutants coming off of the parking lot or so forth are absorbed before they get to the stream. And that can't be done if it's simply a fence, right? With that in mind, the recommendation of the county to change the orientation of the building makes sense to me, notwithstanding your arguments about the aesthetics and functionality as a building, which may be valid. From the standpoint of making impossible an adequate absorptive buffer, I agree with that.
I'm not sure how changing the orientation changes that, because it's still going to be the same amount of parking and the same amount of building.
But
we'll look, I mean, I'm not a designer.
Okay, yeah.
But
So take a look at that.
There are other
It would seem to me
reasons.
that if the long way, the length of the building, the long side of the building were oriented parallel to the road, that it would provide more space with which you could fit perhaps a playground and a buffer, or parking and a buffer. Please consider it at any rate. It mentions somewhere in here that it's not a federally regulated stream, and I'm not sure that that's the case, since it is a stream recognized as, I forget the exact definition.
Designated inland waterway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Could you state that louder for the record?
Designated inland waterway, County
Right.
Road.
Thank you. Designated inland waterway. And I think that was about 3 years ago, something like that. The stream behind, so there are really two waterways that affect the property, as has already been stated. The waterway, which is an open tributary that comes down from Highview Farm and then crosses under North State Road through Culvert, and then across this property through Culvert. That's one. And fish have been observed on both sides of that culvert. So they are successfully passing through that culvert. And that is to your benefit, because to my mind, that suggests that there isn't a pressing need to daylight that. It would be nice to be able to daylight that, but I understand that that would be a significant burden on the property. So I wouldn't, I mean, I would love to see it, but I wouldn't advocate for that strongly, since I know those fish are passing successfully. The stream in the back is the main course of the river, and that is, yes. That is going through a fairly wide wetland. So it's a stream, not well, it's not artificially channelized there, but it is part of a larger wetland system in there, and highly functional.
And then it goes into a culvert again.
And then it does, eventually.
Well, it is right off-site, and then it goes at the next street down at Daylights again.
Okay, okay.
But it is right a couple of feet off our site, it gets re-culverted.
Okay. Well, let me leave it at that for now. But allow me to recommend to your ecologist that he review those comments carefully and make a site visit or multiple site visits as needed to much more carefully document the conditions on the ground.
I will take your substantive recommendations and convey them to him.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? I understand that they only just recently got the staff.
If there's anything in particular that you would like us to try to address, we can.
Does the staff need to
David,
go
is
on
there-
and emphasize any particular portions of their?
I think if Adam or any of the consultants have any questions about the comments we've made, you can get in touch, absolutely. And they're all very straightforward, I think.
Yes.
It sounds like we need to get a response from the applicant on some of these matters, correct?
Well, there needs to be a modification of the drawings. I think Adam and his consultants or his cohorts are going to look at some of the design alternatives conceivably regarding moving the building. So I think we need a new submission.
We had intended to submit new plans after we had gotten David's comments, Dan's comments, and your comments. We'd gotten many of your comments at the last meeting, but we didn't want to start changing piecemeal just so we could hand you more paper this week.
I think that's wise.
That's fine. We do have another comment though.
Yes.
One further comment. Brace yourself. I would also like to
I should have
say
done that 20 minutes ago.
that my previous comments notwithstanding, I think this usage for this property is a very good one. And so I hope that solutions can be found to these various issues.
Thank you.
The board may want to consider, since wetlands and watercourses are issues here, retaining the services, because you have Steve Coleman, who I believe
I think that would be helpful.
the consultant.
Yes, I would think it's a good idea as well.
Would you like me to get in touch with him?
Sounds like a good idea. All right. Do we need a resolution for that?
I mean, the board is allowed to retain
Okay.
consultants as it deems necessary, but if you want to make a formal resolution to,
There's no point. We don't need to have extra paperwork, so. Okay, so that's all we need at this point from you?
I think so. It doesn't sound as if we're ready after tonight to go to public hearing, and we'll work with Dave to get the notice of intent, which you approved to be lead agency circulated.
Yes. Yes. Very good. We look forward to working.
Thank you. Thank you and have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Santucci and Schumer subdivision, 37 and 41 Cove Dam Road, reconfiguration of the existing lots in subdivision. Applicant here?
So apparently they asked if they needed to come. I just confirmed with Sandy, and they haven't come apparently. So I can get this memo out to them, but I wouldn't take this up if they're not here.
Okay, so should we adjourn it, or do we need to do any action on this? No.
I wouldn't do anything since they haven't.
Sounds good to me?
we should adjourn it, though.
Yes.
We should adjourn it.
So let's adjourn it to a date certain?
Here's a review memo.
Yes.
July 18th then, okay. Okay, we have two other adjournments, so we don't have to do any actions in those, right? So then we have the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? No? No?
I'm fine with that.
Anybody want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll second that.
Very good, any objections? None? Great, okay. So the minutes for June 6th are accepted. Are there any new businesses?
I've got one more item,
Okay.
and it's a memo that Sandy is passing around, and it's on the River Knoll DEIS. The town board had said in their comments that the traffic portion of the DEIS should be reviewed, which we had done previously. This is just clarification, and the only thing new in here is the conclusion in the middle of page 2. You've seen the rest of this before, and for the benefit of the town board, we have said we have reviewed the traffic and transportation chapter of the DEIS and find that the methodology, analysis, and conclusions are reasonable and appropriate. And then we make these two recommendations, which we made previously, which I think are important. And the first one is that the FEIS should contain all pertinent correspondence from the DOT as well as the conclusions reached by the DOT regarding this matter. What that means is that they've proposed certain mitigation, but we have no idea whether the DOT will find that mitigation acceptable or not. The DOT could reject it. So they really need to get a at least a conceptual approval of the mitigation from the DOT. And secondly, the FEIS should also address whose responsibility it will be to fund all improvements specified above, and whose responsibility it will be to physically implement all said improvements. The last we heard from Glenn was that he wanted to share the cost of some improvements with Tony Baldati when Tony Baldati was proposing Park Knowles. That didn't happen. So there isn't any commitment in the DEIS by Glenn to pay for the improvements that he's talked about or physically implement those improvements. So I think those two things are very important for him to respond to in the FEIS.
Okay, so you'll make sure that he gets a copy of this?
Yes. Well, he's already gotten the bulk of this. This is really for the benefit of the town board more than anything else.
So your, David's comments as well as Dan's comments on River Knoll should be just incorporated as comments, additional comments
Additional
received
comments
and
in the
it's being
public.
held open and it will have to be responded to in the context of the FEIS.
Okay.
So it's Dan's,
Is that for?
just to include in the comments, this one too. Along with yours. So,
Any other new items?
we get to say it, I guess.
Any other new items? No? Sandy? No? No. Hey, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Any
I'll second that.
Very good, okay. Any objections? None?
No.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.